Well, good evening, everybody. Happy Monday. Hopefully you're all bunkered down at home and you're nice and toasty inside your home getting ready for Monday Night Football, because I'll tell you right now, it is ugly in Buffalo right now. Very ugly. Wind, rain, cats and dogs coming out of the sky. Goalposts are moving. We will get to Monday Night Football, Patriots and Bills. One of these teams will take advantage of one another and get ahead of one another in the AFC East. They do play each other 2 times over their next 3. We'll discuss next week's games as well, how we're feeling. But of course, we react to Sunday. This is the Slate, Brendan Glasheen, with DraftKings contributors Matt Meiselman and Geoff Ulrich. We react to Week 13 Sunday. Fellas, great to have you joining me tonight. Looking forward to Monday night's game here. It should be a good one. We start with yesterday. Meiselman, how do you feel about the NFL right now, and what is your number one story takeaway from the weekend?
So yesterday felt like a little more predictable than usual, where like the good teams did what they were supposed to. I feel like some people might have been half expecting the Rams to just like, I don't know, at least play a close game with Jacksonville or something like that. But it seemed like pretty regular, honestly. Like there were some close games between some fringe playoff teams. I personally wasn't shocked the Ravens lost or anything, or the 49ers lost. I mean, they were both small underdogs or small favorites on the road. I mean, the ultimate outcomes there were a little surprising, but maybe there's not as much chaos happening as there was before, and maybe we'll get a good primetime game for once. But yeah, I don't really have a ton that stands out. Like I think a lot of people are going to take away that Tom Brady put up a ton of points and he's now the clear favorite for MVP, which may be true, but Josh Allen could certainly change that tonight. I just don't think much has changed. I think that tonight's game will be really relevant for playoff implications. And then I think next week there's a couple games on the schedule that will be really relevant. So we'll just kind of have to see.
What do you think, Geoff? You think there's a little more clarity after yesterday's results?
I mean, I wish I had bet last week harder, because like Matt, basically every result that happened was what I expected to happen. I expected the Ravens to potentially lose or just play a very, very close game to the Steelers, and they did. I expected the Seahawks to bounce back. If you go back to 2012, they have the best record in the NFL after a loss. They bounced back. San Francisco isn't that good, so I wasn't shocked with that result. Washington took care of it on the road. I think the biggest shock result for me was probably the Chargers beating the Bengals, but I don't even know if you can call that big a shock. The game was a 3-point spread.
Right.
It's just, I just think that the Bengals are still a better team, but so I was a little bit surprised they got beat there, but that was like the only really one that surprised me a little bit. So yeah, same kind of sentiment. It feels like the whole week is just waiting for this game though, because this one, there's so much implications in terms of AFC as well. So, yeah, I think Brady definitely is. I mean, it's going to be a tough spot. You know, if we just touch on the player like MVP vote for a bit, it's a tough one for Alex. Even if he gets the win, he's probably not putting up big stats tonight either. That's the one thing I'll say. So, you know, it would be big for him to beat the Patriots, but I don't know how much that's going to like factor in, because like, I mean, if he puts up 350 yards in a windstorm, that'll be significant, but I just don't know if that's going to be possible. So I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
Right, and we've already talked about this at some point. Josh Allen has a loss on his resume this year to Jacksonville, but Tom Brady also lost to a Saints team that's reeling. He also lost to the Washington football team. So those will be put to rest and put in the rearview mirror if Allen comes out, has a big game. The 1 seed still on the table for a lot of teams in the AFC. Baltimore had it. New England has it now, but if New England loses tonight, they fall to the 5. Then suddenly Buffalo's a factor. Kansas City is the favorite to land the 1 seed. Couple of thoughts. I agree with you on Chargers and Bengals, but that was the most evenly bet game from the weekend. And to your point, it was a 3-point spread. Folks were going both ways on that game. It wouldn't have surprised us either way, really, what team won that game. Turns out Bengals make a comeback, then the Chargers, they take over. And what do we know? I think Meiselman mentioned it. Keenan Allen now is on the COVID list. So the Chargers go in the other direction, taking on the Giants this week. And the other team is Baltimore. I don't know what you guys think about the call to go for it there at the end and not trust your defense, which probably was pretty tired. Injuries lingering now with Marlon Humphrey out for the foreseeable future. I think they actually might have lost him for the year. I think that might have been the reporting in the secondary. But what do we think of Baltimore, A, going for it, and B, their record this year, if they allow more than 13 points, they're 4-4 this year. They have to win these low-scoring, ugly games in which Lamar is a dominating force on the ground. Do we, Geoff? Do you like the call yesterday? Baltimore going for it?
Okay, I don't, and it comes down to the situation. There's some situations where if you're an underdog or something, you should go for it there. I think when you're playing Mike Tomlin and the Steelers, it's fine to go to overtime because you're the better coach. You're probably the better team, and you're playing Ben Roethlisberger. Like, there's really nothing that like John Harbaugh should be scared of going to overtime against. I know it's overtime and it's like a coin flip, but you need to trust that like Mike Tomlin is going to lose the game because that he will do that, right? Like he won't take chances in overtime. He won't do anything aggressive. He'll play for the tie. I just don't. I think it was a silly risk, to be honest, for them going up in that situation against that team. You have Lamar Jackson. Realistically, you have the best weapon in the game who could reel off a 40-yard run in overtime right off the bat, and boom, like you have a massive edge. I don't think it was a good decision at all in that situation for Baltimore. I'm not shocked the Ravens lost that game. I've said this numerous times. They are like the most like fraudish kind of like, whatever they are now, 8-4. I don't even know what their record is, but the 8-win team, whatever.
So they're 9-4.
They've gotten so lucky this year with certain games, and it kind of caught up to them last week. Like they seem to just be riding this good ride of variance in these really crazy spots, like 66-yard field goals. And I just didn't understand it against the Steelers. I just don't think that was a spot to do it. So that's my take on the Ravens.
Okay.
I think that
8-4, 8-4, like a bunch of other teams.
It is 8 wins.
Just
yeah.
clarifying.
And just to wrap that up, if you're looking at the AFC North odds, all these teams play each other multiple times in the last 5 weeks. This is almost like a round robin going into the last 2 weeks. Obviously, the Ravens have the edge, but like since he's got a win against Baltimore, and they're at what, plus 225 still. They were this morning, so
yep, that's right.
I'd be very interested there. Potentially even just like a little smidgen on the Steelers as well, plus 1,400.
What do you think, Meiselman? I mean, to Geoff, I'll use your point against you. Maybe John Harbaugh is thinking, I've got the best weapon in this game. Why not scheme it up and go for it? Mark Andrews.
Play it out over a larger. I'd rather play it out over a larger sample.
Agreed. No, I'm with you. I think that's the thinking, and I think also at the same time, rivalry game. Let's bury the Steelers, put their season to bed. As it turns out, Meiselman, that didn't work.
Yeah, so I agree and I disagree. The part I agree with is that, yeah, I'm gonna have some complex take that probably is.
Meiselman just always walks that line.
Oh, I like it. It always gets me thinking.
Let's do it. So I think that yes, the consideration in general that you have the better team, you're the favorite, usually should mean that you want to just take overtime. Especially also because Justin Tucker is a much better kicker than Chris Boswell, and overtime is like more field goal relevant than regular quarters of football. So for those reasons, like you would say, yes, the Ravens as the better team with the better special teams, like in overtime, you just take your chances. But Lamar Jackson is also a very unique quarterback where there probably isn't anyone more equipped to convert a 2-point conversion in the NFL than Lamar Jackson run offense. With just like the dual threat at the goal line. Like that's the exact kind of quarterback you would want to have, where like normally the consideration is, okay, we're about 50-50 to make this 2-point conversion. We're maybe 55% to win in overtime. So we'll take overtime, but a Lamar Jackson run offense is going to convert a 2-point conversion well above 50% just because of the nature of how he's able to move around. So
right.
I don't actually know that there's a clear-cut answer here because I think the Ravens are more suited to win in overtime and they're also more suited to convert a 2-point conversion. So maybe we're talking they were 60-40 either way, and it just didn't work out. So yeah, I really don't have a strong feeling there. I think that it was weird. I was surprised, but I don't necessarily think it was the right or wrong move.
And
go ahead.
I know John Harbaugh mentioned this, and there was something about like injury issues on the defense, which I think led into it, which is probably valid as well. But I still think like, I don't know, man. Certain spots, certain teams, like there's
against Big Ben. Come on,
that's what I mean. I don't know. So I think it's not really one of those things where you can probably say, well, he was completely wrong to do it, or he was completely right to do it. there's probably pretty good arguments in both directions, but I was surprised that they did it against the Steelers, man. I feel like that's a team you take your chances with in overtime.
Right.
Yeah,
That's where we very strongly agree, is just being surprised that they did it.
Yeah.
Like I thought San Francisco was going to go for 2 if they tied the game against Seattle. Like if you would have asked me which team is more likely to take the shot, I would have guessed the Niners. Just like it was just such a strange game, the way that one played out. And Pittsburgh-Baltimore, I would have thought that Baltimore would just be thrilled to be able to get the game to overtime. But in the AFC North, the way it sets up now, I'm still, well, it's weird because I was bullish on the Bengals earlier in the season when there was a point in the year where their win total was 6.5. They were just really undervalued. Like they were 3-0 to start the season. I think that's right. Maybe it was 2-1, but they hadn't really played anyone yet, but they had been winning the games fairly convincingly. At this point though, like the Browns to me are a better team. I think Joe Burrow is just wildly inconsistent, and at times he seems really good. And at times, like I don't think he's a good quarterback right now. I think he's better than Baker Mayfield, but the Browns are better in all other facets of the game. Well, I guess besides the passing game, right? Because the Bengals have better wide receivers too, but just defense, running, they have a strong advantage in both of those areas. I just don't think Joe Burrow is good yet. And maybe next year will be a year that he takes a step forward. But the Browns also have a bigger opportunity this coming week to make up ground on the Ravens. And they're just longer odds. Like if you ask me who has a better shot to win the division right now, Bengals or Browns, I think it's Bengals by a little, but it's not enough to justify how low their line is to me. Like I'd rather, even though the Browns are slightly less likely, their odds are so much higher that I think plus 650 there is actually a value. I think the Steelers, like you said, Geoff, like that's probably a good bet also at 14-1. Because I don't think the Ravens should be minus 150 right now. I think they should be closer to even money, and then maybe you bump up the Browns and Steelers. Maybe the Bengals are priced fairly. But it's crazy this late in the season to have a division where conceivably any of these 4 teams could win.
And
it still would take a lot to go right for Pittsburgh to do it, but it's in play, right? They're 6-5-1. The Ravens are 8-4. Pittsburgh still
they've got the head-to-head win against Baltimore.
They have 1 win, right? But the next one's on the road. I think that's probably the biggest reason why their odds are so far. I think because the fact that their upcoming game is on the road, where the Bengals,
which is their season finale, Meiselman, in Baltimore, January 9th. Yep.
And the Bengals and Browns both get to play Baltimore again at their home stadium. So I think that's probably what's creating the largest divide there.
I think Matt's right too. Like Cleveland, it's hard to get behind them, but it's always good to buy teams on this low sentiment too. And that's part of the reason why their odds are big. But the Cleveland defense is probably the best unit in the division, like on either side of the ball. So yeah, it's going to be that there's just like every week is going to have like a division game there. So it's going to be an interesting end.
Browns remaining schedule: home Ravens, home Raiders, at Green Bay Christmas afternoon, and at Steelers, home Bengals. So the 3 of their final 5 are at home. So something to consider. Also, speaking of being close to even money, this can help us transition into tonight. I do want to get a thought on the Chiefs and what you make of them as a defense the last few weeks. Are we overvaluing Kansas City? Is their defense really legit, or are they just still not clicking enough on offense for us to be convinced? Baltimore was at minus 175 going into the weekend to get the number 1 seed. They are now at plus 700. Kansas City with their win last night. Of course, we have to see what happens between New England and Buffalo, but the Patriots have the 1 seed. But there you see Kansas City at the top of the list at plus 250, another 8-4 team in the AFC. Kansas City's the second favorite right now to win the Super Bowl behind Tampa. How do we feel about the Chiefs after last night? Was that more about Teddy Bridgewater and just being god-awful?
Maybe. Yeah, it might have been that. I mean, I generally think Bridgewater's okay, but yeah, he also may be playing through some lower body injuries that I think have knocked him out, or at least caused him to like play with a little bit of a limp or whatever. I'm not really sure, but I think the Chiefs defense is probably not quite as good as they've been playing, but I also think the Chiefs offense is not as bad as it's been playing. So as a full package, like I think this is kind of just what we're going to get. The Chiefs are up there near the top of the league. Maybe they're a tier 2 team. Like I think the Patriots are better as far as picking a team to get the 1 seed. And even though I think the Bills will win tonight, just home field advantage, I think, is enough to overcome the fact that the Patriots are slightly better than them. But the Patriots being much longer odds than the Chiefs for the 1 seed doesn't seem right to me. I think that they're at the same record, similar remaining schedules, and I think the Pats are better. So It's not like I think the Chiefs are bad or anything. I think that they're somewhere in the range of third best to seventh best team in the league. But yeah, this is too much credit, I think, for them. And like, they're not going to keep scoring on defense. It's just not something you can expect. And there were a couple plays in that game that they deserve virtually no credit for, like the Broncos running into their own punt returner to set up a possession in the red zone. Like, that's Denver being bad. The Chiefs did nothing to earn that. So they've gotten a little bit lucky on defense. I think that's going to regress, but I also think Mahomes we'll see him be a little closer to the game versus the Raiders than what he was last night, where their offense basically didn't do anything.
So, and their games, Geoff, to me have looked very similar. Did you guys see the stat pop up last night on NBC? They've scored the most points of any team in the NFL on the opening drive of the game. Whether it's if they have the ball on their first possession, Chiefs 7-0, Chiefs 7-0. Like, they looked excellent on that first drive last night. And I'm thinking, oh man, they're going to steamroll these guys now, which they ended up doing, but more so because Denver was inept. But I don't know what it is. Kansas City, they put together a great first drive. I'm thinking, all right, it's carrying over. This looks pretty legit. And then all of a sudden it falls apart.
It's honestly, I look at that as the Andy Reid factor. He's just so good at scripting plays, but there's like, you can't script the whole game. And I don't know what the problem is with Patrick Mahomes. He just does not look like the same player this year. I don't know if it's injury, mechanics, if there's some kind of thing. He just doesn't, like, he's missing throws that he wouldn't miss. And maybe it's just all the variants coming at once or something like that, or just everything kind of once. But I don't really have interest in betting this Chiefs team. Like, I know their defense has been better, but I don't consider it an elite unit. Shutting down the Broncos isn't really that great. And they were still allowing Javonte Williams big chunks. They just did they're doing enough to win games, but do you really want to take them at this point, like against the Bills in a game, even against the Titans in a game? Like, I look at the Titans. I think the Titans got really, really lucky with the Colts losing to the Bucs. They got the bye. You look at their schedule. They got the Jags. They got the Texans. They got the Steelers, the 49ers, and the Dolphins. They're going 3-2. Like, they're going at least 3-2 in that schedule. Mm-hmm. They're probably going to get the division. If they get the division and they get healthier, I think the Titans a plus 1,000. Like, I'm back on it, man. I mean, they got too high. I said, don't take them here. This is where you get back on. I really do think this division, the AFC, and we're just talking about the AFC here. I'm not talking about like Super Bowl. We're looking at conference championship odds. I think you jump back on the Titans here, man. Like, they're basically ranked 5th, and I think they've got a very, very good path to get their division. Maybe you jump on the Colts too. I don't know. That's a good team. So I could see the argument there, but I think the Titans have a very, very good path to win that division right now, and a plus 1,000. They're back up in those odds, because I just don't see like the Chiefs. The Chiefs are overvalued again. That's the main theme of this. What I'm trying to say.
On the Titans too, like, if Carson Wentz doesn't mess that game up, the head-to-head game in Indy a couple weeks ago, like, we're talking about the Titans potentially missing the playoffs.
Absolutely.
Like, that game is the difference between a potential 1 seed and potentially not being in the playoffs at all. It's crazy just how much that mattered.
Yep.
I'm with you. I think you'd almost prefer this. Mike Vrabel might prefer this, being an underdog at this point. Like, they're on this high, and now they're going to come down the mountain a little bit. So I actually think that might make the Titans, as a team, never mind it from a betting perspective, they might be more comfortable in their own skin being in this spot and being overlooked by the rest of the conference.
I do think the Colts are a good bet down there, though. Like, the more I think about it, I mean, that's a good team. Like, it's, the AFC is just so wide open. I think that you should basically just lay off the favorites is the best strategy.
The Colts do have a long way to go just to get in the playoffs, though.
They do.
They're not much better than 50-50 to make it, even though I agree, like, they're one of the best teams in the NFL. But because of just where they are in the standings, the AFC being kind of top heavy, and then there's a couple teams in the middle. Like, I guess what it really is it's bottom heavy. There's a couple teams with horrible records, and everyone's in the mix after that. So yeah, like, the Colts are really good, but 7-6 is just going to be hard for them.
I mean, maybe Indy. Sorry, Meiselman, to cut you off. Maybe Indy is like the Colt. Indy is the Ravens from 2 years ago, where Jonathan Taylor is Derrick Henry, and they just ride this dude's wave, and you get to the conference title game, and hey, you never know. right? Like maybe now, of course, we found out that the Titans did not take down the Chiefs in the conference title game a couple years ago, but that would be the path, I think, for the Colts. And at the same time, I feel a quarterback, I feel better right now about Carson Wentz than I do Ryan Tannehill. That version of Ryan Tannehill, I guess. Who would you rather have a quarterback right now, Tannehill or Wentz? I'm taking Wentz right now.
Well, if you add Wentz with Michael Pittman versus Tannehill with no one we've ever heard of, like then it's very easy. But
Good
even
point.
just 1v1 at the position, just those two players themselves, I think it's close, and Wentz probably has a slight edge right now.
Okay. All right, very good. I think we should get to tonight, because this is a big game. This really, everything we just talked about might not even matter because of what happens tonight in Buffalo between the Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. Patriots are 8-4. Bills are 7-4. New England's on the bye next week. Home teams have dominated Monday Night Football. They are 11-1 straight up this season. Keep that in mind. 11-1 this year at home. Some other things to think about. Against the spread, home team on Monday Night Football, 9-3. Home favorites are 8-0 on the money line, 5-3 against the spread. Weather. Well, we can talk about the weather first, because that's the developing story of the day, I think. The weather actually playing a significant factor in this game. We're hearing, I guess right now, wind gusts in the 20 mile per hour range, and that's going to be the case deep into the night in Buffalo. Geoff, what kind of impact do you feel the weather makes on game script? And we can start from a betting perspective, how you look at this game.
I mean, from a game script perspective, it's probably just going to throw more variables into it. Like more variables from the fact that there could be more or less variables, less deep balls, probably completed, less big plays, but a lot more potential for like a drop, like a guy going back to catch a punt, and then the ball goes like 10 feet over his head, or he hits it and he drops it. Plays like that. So I think there's going to be more turnover worthy plays, but less big plays on offense. You think about that, and you think usually that favors the Patriots, but like the Bills have pretty good special teams too. They're very well coached teams. So I don't really know if it favors either one. I think they, like, to your point, maybe it favors the home team just because it's their stadium. And I think there is something to that. So the weather definitely, I think most people are saying, well, Buffalo throws more and Josh Allen, is going to sail balls, but Josh Allen also runs the ball more. And the Bills have that option maybe to just call a few more RPOs and stuff like that. So I think you have to give a slight advantage to the home team. This is their conditions. It's their stadium. And you mentioned that against the spread record. So that's kind of how I view this game. I know most people say we'll be viewing the Patriots as the better run team, and they are, but again, the Bills, I think that overall this could actually be like a benefit for them.
Meiselman, what do you think about the weather? And those, by the way, those records, 11-1 straight up, 9-3 against the spread. That is on Monday Night Football this year. The one loss was, I think it was when Russell Wilson didn't play against Pittsburgh. It's one of those games Russ didn't play. So
right.
Take that for what it's worth.
That game. Yeah. The weather is interesting I think for more than what Geoff said too, just because I think the weather could change over the course of the game, right? So like the forecast isn't going to be stagnant for the whole time.
Okay.
It's going to be like a situation where we may have more wind in the first half and less wind in the second half. So I don't know. Have you guys heard anything about that, or like?
I think one of our producers here, Tom, mentioned around 9 o'clock. It's going to remain in the 20 mile per hour range as far as the winds. It's going to be pretty consistent after kickoff, but I guess that's not second half. We're talking closer to like 10 o'clock. What does it look like? We need a green screen. We got to do the weather report somewhere.
Okay. So like,
25 miles per hour plus for the rest of the night, coming from T Pike himself. All right.
I'm just looking at like the latest pictures. It's like legitimately a snow hurricane right now. I mean, it is whipping out there. Like I don't even know if you can throw the ball tonight, like, honestly. So maybe I take back what I said. Maybe this is the Patriots because they're a better running team.
Well, yeah,
it looks insane. I mean, it's. I don't know if this is going to hold up though. And I think to Matt's point, maybe this is what he's getting at. I mean, we could see two different games. Like between the first half and the second half. So,
right. Yeah, that takes away a little of the edge I was kind of looking towards, because if it were true, so let me give an example of last year where you have a situation where the first half and second half are very different. Like, this is a very extreme example, but last year in week 17, and this is kind of a common thing for week 17s, the Bills announced that Josh Allen and the starters were only going to play the first half against the Dolphins. And the Bills were favored by a lot for the game. The line obviously came down a bunch, but the first and second half lines moved proportionately. So the Bills ended up being only like -2 for the game. They were -1 for the first half and -1 for the second half. But Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs, and the rest of them were playing the first half, and none of them were going to be playing the second half. So what I thought was the smartest move ever, was bet the Bills in the first half and bet the Dolphins in the second half. The Bills went up big early. They ended up winning 56-26. So they just won both halves. It ended up being a total wash. But anyway, like, the fact that those two halves were priced the same was totally wrong. Like, the Bills were essentially two different teams in each half. I'm not going to say we have two different weathers in these two halves, like, because that's not true, right? We could have had a situation where we're looking 30-40 mile per hour winds in the first half, and then it's down to like 10 or 15 in the second half, where you have a totally different game. So what I'm really looking to do is just wait and feel it out. And maybe if we see by like the 2-minute warning of the first half, the wind is dying down, like we can see that on the broadcast, maybe you just bet a live over at that point. But I don't think, like, if it's too uncertain before the game, you can't really do much yet. But I am actually interested to bet like a second half over, let's say, at halftime, if it seems like the weather's clearing up.
This total has moved drastically, the weather playing a factor since it opened at the end of week 12 Sunday. So last week, a week ago yesterday, it was at 46. Then it moved to 44, 43.5, because both teams had good games defensively. We saw the Bills play well on defense Thanksgiving night against the Saints and the Patriots. While it did allow a lot of rushing yards in that game to Tennessee, 16 points allowed for New England, I think they allowed 2 100-yard rushers against the Titans, if I remember correctly. But Patriots, again, points allowed. They did the job. For those wondering, two weather games that stand out to me, at least from last year, when the Rams and the Packers met in Wild Card Weekend, we were all freaking out about the weather, and then the forecast went the opposite direction. It actually wasn't that big of a deal. And then the other one that comes to mind, when the Patriots and the Bills played last year, now granted, no fans, it was the COVID season, Monday Night Football, I think it was in Buffalo. I can't remember, but temperature was in the mid-40s, no snow, no wind, and that's when Josh Allen torched New England. That's when Josh Allen kind of proved to everybody that, hey, he's kind of figured Belichick out. It's not as bad as it seems, like it was his rookie year or his second year in the league. So Geoff, Mr. Over 40.5. I mean, that's pretty low now, man. 46 to 44. Now it's 40.5.
The only bet I made for this game is under, and it was at 41.5.
Okay.
That's my favorite play. I'm probably not going to touch the money lines or anything or the spreads in this one, just because there's just too much. I just feel like the line is close to correct. I'm not as high. I still think the Bills are a good team. I kind of agree with Matt, like the Patriots are better, but I'm just not at that interested in betting this one, for various reasons. But I was on the under. I mean, I think if you are like at 40.5 now, because that's a point from where I've obviously bet it. If you're still interested in the under, I think you need to do some weather research. Like, I really do. I think you need to make sure that this is sustained, that this isn't going to be like, oh, you come out at a half and all of a sudden it's just like a nice little breeze. Like, the breeze is gone, the snow's done. And, Josh Allen is just ripping 40-yard passes for the second half, because that could happen, right? Because it's a really low total. And I like what Matt talked about, betting the total in game. Again, like, do some research and check what's going on. And if it starts to die down a little bit, get on those low totals and go over. That's how I would play it right now. I think that at 40.5, it's not as much juice there to take the under, although I'm certainly not like saying jump on the other side either. So
yeah, we do know what the total would have been if there was no weather issues, because it opened somewhere around 46 to 48.
Yeah.
So like, if the second half doesn't have any weather concerns, like if somehow it just kind of clears up, then we should have expected the second half total to be around 23 or 24. And if it's only 19.5, let's say, and especially if the first half is really low scoring, you'll often see the second half have a lower total also. Right. But if, let's say, the first half goes and it's like 7-3 because
right, you're saying live
really bad. Yeah, the live total at that point might only be 18 or so, because odds makers are looking at what happened so far and are like, okay, the second half needs to be adjusted a bit because of what the first half looked like. And in reality, it could actually be the opposite if the weather's changing. So that's also another reason why I kind of just want to wait till halftime and like, yeah.
But you have enough confidence. You have enough confidence to use really 10 minutes to make a judgment on weather to make that call.
Well, it's not really like just the halftime window.
You're a sportsbook content specialist. You should. Can the people feel confident to make that call?
It's easier if you're watching the game too, because you can see how the last 5 minutes of the second quarter look, and you can see like, is it dying down? And then we actually had the opposite of this happen already this season with a Bills primetime game, where the Bills and Chiefs played the first half with basically no weather issues. And then the game actually got delayed to start the second half, where they couldn't start it on time because there were massive storms. And when they came out of the locker room for the second half, like the second half total hadn't changed, but the field was drenched. There was wind. It was still raining. Like that was also part of the reason that Mahomes was so bad in that game, because the second half, they really couldn't hold on to the football. The weather was brutal. So like that was the opposite situation, right? Where you could see it though, and you did get like a little bit of additional information you otherwise wouldn't get, because there was, I think, a 40 or 50 minute delay before they even started the second half. So of course that was a little easier than usual. But even just going into halftime, it was clear, like in the final minute or two of the second quarter, the rain was starting to pick up, like this was going to become a problem. So maybe you're able to see like the opposite happen. I mean, if you're unable to tell, you just don't bet, right? Like that's why I think it's easy to just wait until halftime and then just make your decision then. But the 15 minutes for halftime, I think, is enough time. And the other point I was going to make in relation to Bills Chiefs on this topic is the announcers are going to be talking about it the whole halftime show. Like this is, if the weather is shifting, like that's what they're going to focus on. That was what happened in that primetime game earlier in the season. If they start to if the snow is stopping, you're going to see pictures of the field where the snow is stopping. I don't think you need to be in the stadium to get a sense of what's going on.
We got to trust Susie. Was it Susie Kohlberg? Is that her name? Susie. Well, maybe we'll trust the Mannings.
You don't need to trust what they're saying. We'll just trust what it looks like behind them when they cut to them on the field. That's all. The Mannings might.
Oh, are they there? We don't even know if they're there. Are they there? They could be there.
They're probably. Where do they normally broadcast from? Is that from their homes?
It varies. I think sometimes they're live on the field. Other times they're in the studio.
The Mannings are on the 50-yard line for this game. Then sure, we'll trust. If they're actually in-house, then yeah, that's basically how we're going to decide to bet this game. What Peyton and Eli are saying at halftime.
Okay. Interesting. Before we move to the showdown, how about props? So I saw Steve Buchanan put this out on Twitter. He saw what it looked like outside. Like you said, Geoff, wind, snow combination. Are you tempted to take an over on a half interception, say, for Josh Allen? Mac Jones, I said it to Meiselman before we went live, plus money on Mac Jones right now to throw a pick. It wasn't plus 100. Now it's at minus 105.
Yeah, I mean, these props are shifting. Like they've shifted like crazy just since this morning. So I think I threw out like Josh Allen, like 280 yards combined to take the over on his pass and rush. And now it's at like 265. So just to give you an idea of how much it's shifted since the start of the day, I do like that bet. Over one interception on Josh Allen. I think he's thrown an INT in like, I can't remember, 7 straight games, something like that. I like it, man. I do. I mean, I think that's a good bet, even regardless, quite frankly, of the weather. 5
of the last 6, Allen has thrown a pick. 5 of the last 6.
I think the one thing you could say, I don't know if the wind helps the defensive players catch the ball either. Like that's the one argument you could make, but I still like that bet. It's mainly just respect to the Patriots defense and the fact that the Bills will throw the ball, I guess. And again, another argument you could say is maybe you won't see many pass attempts, but that's one I can still get behind. Absolutely.
Okay. And then I guess the concern of not going with Mac Jones is because New England might scheme it up where he doesn't have to throw it as much. And as Meiselman said, he might throw it like 3 yards, right? Like he could throw the ball 15 times in this game.
Totally.
Right.
Totally.
So
Absolutely.
Might not be as attractive to play.
And Josh Allen always going to be like Buffalo just as an offense, even in windstorm, I expect will probably be throwing the ball a little bit more downfield than New England. So I think Allen is the better INT target for sure.
What am I missing here on Damian Harris? 50 and a half?
50 and a half now.
I think a lot of work to Ramondre Stevenson, which is someone who I definitely want to focus on when we get to showdown. I think that they're kind of in a split right now.
Pretty much.
Okay.
You've got to play the guessing game a little bit here. I'm fine with just like piling on Harris in like all formats because like, I get it. Like, if you're playing the past 3 games, like, it's basically been a split. But I do feel like in these sorts of games, this is a spot where, especially with Brandon Bolden not 100%, you may just see Harris just potentially play more snaps. This is just trying to play mind games and get inside Bill Belichick's head, which is always dangerous. But that is kind of what I'm thinking may happen tonight. I'm sure, like, playing the usage over the last 3 weeks is probably the smarter way to go, which makes Stevenson a more attractive target with the lower rushing totals. But I think both those guys are legit, targets there. I also don't mind Devin Singletary, like, total yards, to go over. I mean, he I know he got outshined by Matt Breida last game, but he played, like, he got like 17 touches or something. So he was on the field a lot.
It's at 59.5 receiving and rushing combined. So there you go. Anything else props wise? We want to go to the showdown.
No, I mean, like, the problem is, like, a lot of the things I mentioned, like, I like taking the under on Josh Allen's yardage, but that was this morning.
Yeah.
I don't really want to go to the over.
You're talking rushing or passing
and rushing. Like, I liked taking the unders on those this morning, but they've
half.
moved so significantly now that I think that this is a good game to play right now. Like, I think that these yardage and these props, a lot of them have adjusted. I think that you could take a shot with the Patriots running back, but like, the passing totals are really low now. So I think the juice on the under is gone. And
right.
Like, do you really want to take the over on passing yards with the blizzard? I mean, I think you wait and see what's going on in game. So
yeah. And just before we move on, kind of to Meiselman's point. So he brings up the meeting between the Chiefs and the Bills way back. What was that, like week 4 or 5 of the season, Matt?
Yeah.
Something like that, early October, mid-October. The Patriots on their end, they haven't really played. They played Tampa in rain, but no wind. They played in a little bit of snow against Cleveland, but that game was in hand at that point. There was really snow in the second half, but the Patriots had already blown them out of the game, and Mac Jones played in the SEC. So we've yet to really see him play in, like, horrid wind and snow together.
By the way, this is a somewhat related point, but you just mentioned that Bucs-Pats game. Can you imagine the Patriots being 7-point underdogs at home against the Bucs now? Like, that line looks absurd in hindsight.
Right.
We could almost argue New England's better than Tampa Bay right now.
And remind who covered? I actually forget who covered that game.
The
Pats
Patriots
lost
covered
by 3 or 4.
Yeah, the Patriots covered easily. Yeah,
right. They tried to kick a field goal with Folk 56 yards out. He missed it.
Yeah,
so they lost by 2. I think that's right.
Which, by the way, Nick Folk, again, maybe it's a moot point because of the weather. Since that miss against Tampa, Nick Folk may be the best kicker in the NFL. Just saying. Guy's been a freaking beast.
Justin Tucker's missed a couple over the last few weeks.
That's what I'm saying, man. Since Tucker made the 66-yarder. Cliff.
He used all of the leg strength he had for that one, and now
that's it.
out.
Yeah, all in Detroit.
He's missed like 2 kicks, and we make a big deal of it. But Folk's been good, for sure.
It's true. Yeah, Folk's been very good. But again, maybe it won't matter because of the weather. Or it depends on which way the wind's going, I guess. If it's going side to side, it's probably a mess. Okay, so this is all relatable to the showdown because the top 2 guys priced are Allen and Diggs. Now, of course, we know Allen has the rushing capabilities. You got to fade Steph Diggs, right? Or do you go contrarian, Meiselman, Mr. Contrarian? Do you captain Steph Diggs as a – all right, well, because as we know, Meiselman, you can't do the little live showdown bet, right? You pick it, you stick it. So you got to make a prediction for the whole game here. We can't live bet a showdown.
Well, there are second-half showdown contests, but we'll stay away from those right now. Just throwing that out there, some people might be interested in that sort of thing. But
that means you are.
Yeah, potentially. We'll see how it looks at halftime. We'll see how the weather's looking. Maybe the wind is still.
Wow. So you're giving yourself only 10 minutes to make live bets on the sports book and make a second half showdown lineup.
I've been doing this a long time. I've figured out how to manage these things.
Meiselman must be the red hat for ESPN. He's the guy. So if people, that's a TV term, the red hat, they walk onto the field. That's what keeps the commercials going. So Meiselman is going to be in Buffalo with the red hat, and he's going to give himself extra time to set his lineup and make a live second half bet.
Yeah, I might have to worry about breaking my laptop in the weather conditions.
That's true.
But otherwise, yeah, I got to get
okay.
cover it up.
All right, enough for me. What's your take? What do you think? Showdown.
So I'm not sure that Diggs is going to be a contrarian captain. He will certainly be less popular than Josh Allen, who might be the captain in 50% of lineups or something. I don't think you can fade Josh Allen. I think you can fade Josh Allen at captain. So we can definitely have a conversation about who else to play at captain. But like Allen's rushing capability just makes him, it's too hard for him to not be in the winning lineup in some capacity. Like he needs basically 11 points or something to at least just get into the winning lineup. So if he doesn't get injured, like he's probably getting that. The captain thing is a different conversation. So I do still think Diggs is going to be a popular choice just because there are a lot of cheap players in this game and it's not that hard to fit him. There's no one really that's super expensive besides Diggs, Allen, and then Mac Jones, Damian Harris. But like even those guys, 10K or less, like this isn't a Chiefs game where you have to make this decision of where Mahomes is like 12,000 and then, Hill and Kelsey are well over 10. Like Allen's only 11.2 and Diggs is 10.6. So like those are kind of values. Like they would normally be a little bit higher than that. So I don't know, like who else are you looking at? I guess if you don't captain those guys, I'll let you guys go first and then I'll kind of come back to the running back thing because I do think that's kind of where the focus should be.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely. I mean, I think you could think about instead of playing Diggs, you could go with like Emmanuel Sanders and hope he gets just like 12 targets and they're all like, short passing or something like that. I don't hate that play, but I think that the better play is probably look at the running backs from either side, either Devin Singletary or, one of the Patriots running backs. And like I said, I prefer Harris, but I think more people will look to play the Ramondre Stevenson. I don't know if they'll play him in the captain, but I think definitely like in the flex. But I would go with Harris. I mean, if the Patriots win this game, I think that, they win it by, I think a scenario that could happen is the Patriots win, we're talking about how good they are. Well, one scenario is they win by a touchdown or more. And if that happens, I think it's just because Damian Harris did what Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry did to this Bills team. And it's just beat them physically. And I think Damian Harris is a good enough runner to do it. And that's where I'd go. I think that the fact he's expensive too, he's not too expensive, but I still think it'll keep his captainship down just enough. So that's probably where I would go.
Okay, so Damian Harris.
I like Singletary too, though.
Okay.
I do kind of like Singletary. I mean, again, on the other side, like if the Bills win, I mean, there's a path for Singletary to maybe have a similar game. So
yeah, I think this is a hard showdown, and it's kind of why I wanted to hear Geoff's take first, because I think ownership is going to be really difficult to predict. I think on the one hand, like if you have people that are just running lineup builders and using projections and stuff, you would just kind of assume they're going to have Diggs and Allen, like a lot of Allen captain, and then some defenses and kickers, because those you kind of need those to fit sometimes, and some of the cheaper receivers. But people are looking at the weather and like who's going to see what's going on outside and be like, yeah, I'm comfortable with Tyler Bass and Nick Folk in my lineup. I'm comfortable just leaning on the passing game. Like they're looking, I think people know what's going on here. So I'm having personally like a harder time than normal determining what the field is going to do, just because like it's not, there's a second variable here that we don't normally have where it's like people are seeing the weather.
What do you think the Patriots D is going to be captained at? Because I think that's another option.
So I think the Bills defense is going to be relatively chalky. I don't know that the Patriots, like I think the split maybe is something like 25% of lineups have the New England D and only like 1 or 2% of those are captaining them.
I think a really good. Sorry, go ahead. No, finish your thought. Sorry.
At those numbers, maybe that's worth it. Yeah, but I think the Bills will be substantially higher than that in both categories.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people, even though it's going to be a crazy game and it's a showdown, I think people just can't physically or mentally get themselves to captain a defense and then also play Josh Allen in the flex. So I think that'll keep people away from captaining the Patriots. I really like that play here, putting Allen in the flex and then the Patriots captain.
Well,
I think
you need a touchdown, even with like as low scoring as this game might be. I mean, unless New England's winning like 14-3 or something, you probably need them to score.
Yeah.
So like that's my hesitation of putting them in the captain slot. Like it does open up salary, but again, like if you don't want to play, like it doesn't make a ton of sense to play New England defense captain and then play like Diggs, Allen, and Dawson Knox in the same lineup, because like the chances that New England D is great and all those other guys are also what you needed for the winning lineup, that's pretty low. So I definitely I think the New England defense call in general as a flex play makes sense, but for captain, it's just like I think you're banking on a touchdown, which it's just so random. If you're playing
New England's defense has scored a defensive touchdown in 3 straight road games.
This whole game is going to be random. Well, I mean, football's random, but
yeah,
specifically today.
I mean,
I don't
it may sound
Okay,
obvious, like,
you know what,
okay, if they
Meiselman?
score, yeah,
Meiselman, let me help you. Let me help you.
okay.
I think I might be able to help here.
Glash
Normally,
is
I'm
going to
just
figure this one out for us. Okay, go
normally
Glash.
I'm just a
Ready.
facilitator, but here I think I can help. Meiselman, if you're going to tell me now, look, the big key to this is if Mac Jones only throws the ball 15 times tonight, well, this might not help. But if the way they've run their offense to cater to this young quarterback, if he's just going to take the snap and get rid of it, well, yards after the catch, maybe you get a guy like Kendrick Bourne out of the slot in space. So in a way, he'd pick up yards in garbage form where Mac Jones would get credited with passing yards, but maybe get it to their speed guys. Jonnu Smith, they've done this in the first quarter now the last couple of weeks. They'll throw it to him, try this little screen play and let Jonnu roam and go crazy out in the open field with blockers in front of him. Maybe there is a way for the passing game to work for New England. On the other side, maybe Cole Beasley's their guy. Maybe you think about the speed receivers, get them out on the outside, short dink and dunk, and you get those yards that way.
No, I don't think that's a bad call at all. I think you definitely want to be careful trying to stack Mac Jones with like multiple receivers. And I actually think Jones himself is probably the guy to avoid because it's not like he's going to be very contrarian or anything. He's a very obvious player in this game. I mean, the quarterbacks are usually popular, especially when the game's close. So like, I think having a lineup where you have Bourne on one side and Beasley or Sanders on the other side, or Jacoby Myers or whatever, just like one receiver from each team, certainly could get on board with that. But my focus is just like all the running backs. I don't actually think it would be crazy to make a lineup that has 5 running backs in it. Like, I really don't think that that's that insane because this just could be a game where there's just more rushing volume. The Bills are a little tougher to predict because they tend to run a lot if they're winning by a lot. Other than that, they don't pass that much. But again, like this could be a game where you're checking the ball down a bunch and there could be more throws to the running back. So that's kind of where I'm looking. Like even Damian Harris, who doesn't normally catch a bunch of passes, like if you want to get the ball out of your hands quickly, you just throw like 2-yard dump offs to Damian Harris. I think we could see a lot of checkdowns. And so like Brandon Bolden makes plenty of sense. And then I think I don't think you have to avoid playing Singletary and Breida in the same lineup. Normally I would say just pick one because the odds of them both having a good game are low. And I would normally say like just pick 1 or 2 Pats running backs because what are the chances they all do really well? But like the winning score for this contest could be very low where like each running back getting you between 7 and 13 points actually is good enough. Like you just play Josh Allen and 5 running backs. Like that's honestly the direction that I'm sort of leaning. So maybe not quite that extreme, right? Maybe you play Josh Allen, 4 running backs and Kendrick Bourne, maybe 3 running backs with Myers and Sanders, something like that. I am worried though, like what people are going to do playing the defenses. Like I would not be shocked if the contest starts and we see like 50% Buffalo defense and 35% New England defense, because people are, and I wouldn't be shocked if it's 25 and 20% either. It just seems like there's a huge range of what the field might do. Normally my take is I have no idea what's going to happen, but I know what the field's going to do. So at least like, here's the angle where if I'm right, this will gain the edge. There's more uncertainty here because I have a very limited understanding, I think, of what how the field is going to react to the weather conditions.
Okay, very good. If you roster both defenses in the flex, you're talking about $10,500 per player the rest of the way. It is a milli maker on DraftKings. Get involved if you wish. Really quick, we'll do a couple things here in the final 5 minutes. Number one, NFL related. Is there a game each of you is already targeting next week that you have your eyes on? Geoff, last week it was Dolphins -3, and that worked out really well because Daniel Jones got ruled out, and then the closing line was -6.5, and well, I was happy. I was thrilled. I thank you for that, Geoff Ulrich. I got on that like you did.
Well, that was Lamarck and I. I mean, I think we all agreed on it. It was a group effort.
Lamarck too.
Getting on that early -3, 3.5, whatever it was. It was too low. We all knew it. We got the good break with the Mike Glennon stuff too, but I don't think it really mattered who started a quarterback in that game. Dolphins.
Which by the way, real quick, Joe Judge after the game. I mean, that guy after the game. Oh, I saw some improvement.
He almost kept it close against the Dolphins. Yeah.
Like what happened to being angry the week before? I don't know. Sorry, go ahead.
So I don't really have like a big take for next week. Like certainly not one as hard as like we like that one from the week prior. I kind of think I don't want to go back to Detroit. Never mind. I'm not even going to go there. And I don't know if I want to go to the Giants. I mean, I think honestly, the one that sticks out to me the most though is the Giants at plus 10.5. Like the Chargers are not a team that should be getting 10.5 against anybody. Their defense, even though it played well last week, you saw how quickly the Bengals got back in that game. I think 10.5 is too big. And, Daniel Jones, I don't know. I guess
Keenan Allen to the COVID list.
Keenan Allen to the COVID list. Good point. Great point. It just seems too big. I just don't want to take the Chargers. Like there's no way I'm betting the Chargers at 10.5 against anyone. So ipso facto, I have to like the Giants at 10.5.
It'll be a Giants home game too. All Chargers home games.
Oh, exciting. But other than that, like a lot of these lines just, they don't really stick out to me. I think Washington not getting much respect at +4 is something that's interesting. But again, I don't think that line is like super off. And I think the other game that has some interest to me immediately is the Bengals at San Francisco. Again, Bengals only -1 at home field. I think that's an overreaction. I think that game should probably be closer to -3. So I think the Bengals are another team that like would be on my early list right now, is on my early list right now for sure.
Packers should smash the Bears too. It feels like a good spot, but
yeah, it's a lot of points though.
It's a lot of points. Meiselman, we have a few minutes, so. You said it. You said the Giants. You like the Giants.
So
too.
I agree with one and disagree with one. I think Geoff and I are just on a different page on the Bengals. I like this Giants call. I think Keenan Allen not playing is a big deal. And yeah, the Chargers just, no matter what, find a way to let the other team back in the game. And I don't think this is like a thing we have to buy into necessarily, like on the surface, but the Chargers are very inconsistent. So sure, they could go up 21 and then just keep going and win a game 42-0, but they seem to be a very high variance team. And I think Keenan Allen is like, he's their security blanket in the passing game. Just throwing bombs to Mike Williams over and over again. Like that could result in a massive game for Herbert, or it could be a really bad game. And I don't think the drop off from Daniel Jones to Mike Glennon is that much. So yeah, this line probably should be like 8 or 9. I think the Giants are a solid bet. Might even lean under here because Keenan Allen not playing is just, I think it's going to hurt their offense a good amount. Like Keenan Allen is one of the more valuable receivers in the NFL, but for this Bengals Niners game, that line was actually 2 like an hour ago. It's down to 1. I just don't think the Bengals are good. And I think like there's a reaction to, it seems like there's an overreaction to how the Niners lost more than how the Bengals lost, because I think the public perceives the Chargers to be a good team and the Bengals can be excused for losing that one. The Niners lost to like whatever Russell Wilson is now with his finger injury that has kept him from being like a competent quarterback since he returned. So I think like the Niners are getting dinged by the recent performance more because I think the public perceives the Seahawks a lot worse than the Chargers. And to me, the Niners are just a significantly better team. So like, I think this game should be pick 'em, maybe a small edge for San Francisco. But it's already at 1. So like, I don't feel overly confident here. Like the line is already adjusted a bit. It's really this Giant spot where I think like that's the one that stands out as the wrong line.
And there's a chance Deebo Samuel returns. We got to keep an eye on Joe Burrow's pinky. Brandon Ayuk.
Joe Burrow might be Russell Wilson now, right? Like,
yeah,
it's not the same injury. Of course, you can't just say like any all finger injuries are going to make quarterbacks play really bad. But if Deebo's back and Burrow's playing banged up, then that swings things towards the Niners a lot too.
And just a difference from last week, the last point is now we see a lot of home favorites. This past week it was road favorites. This week a ton of home favorites by pretty long margins here. So, all right, we have all week to talk about that. That's going to do it. Well, almost lost my phone. That's going to do it for us. Thank you all so much for watching. We need to go. The Sweat is back at 11 a.m. tomorrow to get you ready for week 14 in the NFL. Meanwhile, good luck tonight with your lineups. Bills, Patriots tonight, showdown, and your bets for Geoff Ulrich, Matt Meiselman, Eamon, and Tom behind the scenes, Brendan Glasheen. Thanks for watching. Oh, and last thing, I'm going to do a little plug. Going on TikTok at 6:30 on the DraftKings account. So come hang out. We can talk about the weather some more. Take care, everybody.
One day I'll download TikTok.